Hello, this is KlinkHanson from theriffle.blogspot.com. I'm here to do my second tying tutorial. Today we're going to tie a KlinkHanson, a sulfur colored size 14 KlinkHanson. KlinkHanson is my version of a klink hammer. It's very similar to a klink hammer, only totally different. Uses a different hook, different materials. And it's like, whoops, uh-oh. Get this back into position here. And there we go. So let's get ready to tie a KlinkHanson. That was a finished fly. We'll put a brand new hook in the vise here. This is a size 14 Daiichi 1130, I believe. Size 14, like I said. You could also use a Tiemco 2487 or any light wire scud hook. I'm going to start the thread here at about the 1/4 point and just do a few wraps with my jam knot and let it hang right there. Next I am going to get the parachute material ready. I'm going to use some ginger colored antron here. I'm just going to loop that underneath the hook like that, straight up. Go take my thread from behind and put it in front, wrap about 3 or 4 wraps on the front of that yarn, and I'm going to do the same in the back, do about 3 or 4 wraps. Then my next step is to just go right around the yarn itself. I'm not going around the hook shank here. I'm just wrapping right around the yarn. I put about 4 or 5 wraps right at the base. I'm going to start to work my way up. I go up about 1/8 of an inch or so, and I need to hold on to the yarn so it doesn't flop around too much as I'm working my way up. After I get up about 1/8 of an inch, I come back down towards the hook shank and do a few wraps in front and behind, a couple of figure eights there on the hook shank, and I'm ready to tie in my hackle. I'm going to use some ginger colored saddle hackle for this fly, and every time I tie hackle on, I always prepare it the same way. I take the butt end of the feather and pull the fibers out at about a 90-degree angle, and then I trim off a bunch of them about 1/4 of an inch high or so, and leave little nubbins there. Now for my parachute hackles, this is how I always tie them in. I start with the thread in front of the wing, place the hackle so that the butt end and the nubbins are facing towards me, coming in from the far side of the hook. Just throw my thread over it there behind the wing, and then I want to marry that wing to the post. So I wrap up the wing again and bind that hackle right to the post. For this fly, I angle the hook now after that part of the fly is done, because I want to use a lot of the bend of the hook for my body. First of all, I'm going to tie in some copper wire here for a rib. I just tie that right behind the wing and then work my thread back down the bend quite a ways, maybe halfway down the bend or so. Let me get this so you can see this a little better. There we go. Okay, now I will tie that in, and I like to just tie it to the side of the hook. Makes the body look a little wider instead of taller when you wrap your wire onto the side of the hook. And I'll bring my thread back up towards the wing, and I'm going to get about 6 to 8, maybe 10, I don't know, 6 to 10 fibers off of a pheasant tail here, a ring neck pheasant tail. And I'm going to get those ready, just trim off the tips so that they're all even, pinch them on top there, and tie them in. Work my thread back to where the wire is hanging off the back there. And then I'll bring my thread back up to the wing. I'll take the whole bunch of pheasant tail fibers here, wrap them over and away from me, and each successive wrap will be right in front of the previous wrap, and work my way up. This is one way that my fly is different than a klink hammer. I like to use pheasant tail for the abdomen. It's darker. I think it looks more like a nymphal shuck, or at least the colors of a mayfly nymph. So I like to use that, and we tie that off here with a few wraps of thread. And I'll trim the excess pheasant tail fibers there as close as I can. Done. Now I take my copper wire, and I like to counter wrap my copper wire. Makes it a little stronger, I think. And nice evenly spaced wraps. We'll go work up our way towards the wing. And I will tie that off with about 3 or 4 wraps of thread. And then to save my scissors, I just like to wiggle my copper wire off. Let me move this into position. We don't need to have it angled like that anymore. Just wiggle that wire off and it'll pop right off. Next I'm going to dub the thorax, and I'm going to use some Pale Evening Dun colored superfine dubbing here. And you don't need much, we're only doing the very front of the fly. So I've got probably 2 inches of dubbing here on my thread, and I'll start right in front of the abdomen there, where I tied off my pheasant tail and my copper wire. Do a couple wraps right there, work my way towards the wing, try to cover up all the thread wraps, all the pheasant tail wraps, anything else that might be showing there. We don't want anything to show. And I'll start to wind my hackle. This is the way I always wind my parachute hackle. I always start at the top of the thread wraps on my post, go counterclockwise, and each wrap around I kind of I duck the feather underneath the previous wrap, work my way down to the body. Once I get down there, and I hold it on the far side of the hook, bring my thread over and under the hackle that I just wrapped, and I kind of switch hands. As I do that, after 1 or 2 wraps, that should be tied in nice and tight. Well, I could do 3 or 4 wraps just to make sure it's in there. Then I want to make sure I don't cut my thread as I trim the hackle out, so I get my bobbin out of the way there. And I take my trusty curve point Tiemco scissors and trim right underneath the eye as close as I can. If there's any loosey-gooseys in the way, you can trim those out at the same time. And there we go, looks good. Okay, then I bring my thread back over and do a few more wraps. That hackle's in there pretty good right now, so you can just pull it up and out of the way. And do 3 or 4 more wraps. As you go around the front of the hook, you got to make sure to dip underneath that hackle so you don't bind any of those down. I'll take my trusty Mattarelli style whip finisher here and tie that off. 3 or 4 wraps and it should be good. Trim the thread. Trim the wing to about the length of the body or so. And our KlinkHanson is finished. It's a size 14. You can tie this in any size you want, any color thorax you want to match the naturals, and I hope you enjoy it. Have a great day.